Have you ever read an ancient text and come across a passage that reads something like, "The Lord will bring affliction into the land and ruin the wicked from the face of the earth"? And then there are stories like in the Book of Job, where he was tested by Satan and lost everything only to regain it at the end. Or maybe you've watched a superhero movie, where the hero has to defeat the villain to save the day. Well, these are all examples of a very common literary device used throughout history called the Manichaean dualism of good versus evil. Light versus darkness, the righteous versus the wicked. But have you ever wondered what happens to the wicked? Do they get away with their evil deeds, or do they suffer the consequences? And if so, when and how does that happen? Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to explore the concept of cosmic justice and what happens to the wicked in the grand scheme of things. Let's dive right in. Ancient texts often frame life as a battle between the righteous and the wicked. It can be easy to assume that the righteous will always triumph over the wicked. After all, who wants to root for the bad guys? But the reality is more complex than that. In many stories, the wicked seem to get away with their evil deeds, leaving us wondering if there is any real justice in the world. Are the scales of karma balanced, or do the bad guys always win? Is there such a thing as cosmic justice? To answer this question, let us turn to a lesser-known apocalyptic text from the Dead Sea. Scrolls known as the Book of Enoch. This fascinating work gives us a glimpse into the beliefs of the sect that lived near. Qumran wrote the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. In this text, the righteous and the wicked are clearly divided. Those who are righteous are watched over by angels who protect them and make sure they don't get hurt. On the other hand, the angels keep an eye on the wicked too, and they report their behavior directly to God. So basically, the righteous are like the VIPs of this world, hanging out with the heavenly VIPs while the wicked are being watched by the heavenly security detail. But things get even more interesting when we consider what happens after someone dies. According to the Book of Enoch, when a righteous person dies, their soul goes off to heaven to be with God, while the soul of the wicked goes down to hell. Talk about a split in eternity. But that's not all. The Book of Enoch also says that God will gather all the righteous people from different generations, like a huge reunion of the godly, and the angels will help gather them together. Meanwhile, God gathers all the wicked people in one place, perhaps for their final judgment. It's like God is throwing the ultimate cosmic party, but only inviting the righteous to the after party. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that sounds great for the righteous, but what about the wicked? What happens to them at the end? Well, according to the Book of Enoch, the wicked are ultimately punished. They are trapped in a place of torment forever, unable to escape. In fact, the text says that the wicked are tormented in the same way they tormented others when they were alive. For example, if they were greedy, now they have nothing. If they were violent, now they are victims of violence. Right. Talk about a cosmic payback. In many traditions, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the wicked may prosper for a time, but their fate is sealed by divine law. They will eventually face judgment and pay for their sins. This is often depicted in religious texts and artwork as a dramatic showdown between good and evil. The wicked are ultimately defeated and sent to a place of torment, often referred to as hell. However, it's important to note that in many of these traditions, the righteous aren't always shown as triumphant in this world either. They often face persecution and suffering, but their faith and good deeds are rewarded in the afterlife. In other words, the cosmic justice isn't always immediate or obvious, but it is inevitable. Think about it like this. We live in a society that values justice and fairness. When someone commits a crime, we expect them to be brought to justice. Yet sometimes the guilty go unpunished, whether because they have too much money to hire a good lawyer, or because the evidence against them is circumstantial. We feel frustrated when we see this happen because we know that justice hasn't been served. Similarly, in many religious traditions, the wicked may go unpunished in this world, but their actions don't go unnoticed by a higher power. They may prosper for a time, but they are ultimately held accountable for their deeds. For the righteous, life may be full of challenges and suffering, but their faith and good deeds are remembered. They may not always win in this world, but they can take comfort in the promise of a just and fair reward in the next one. So don't lose faith when you see the wicked getting away with their evil deeds. Cosmic justice may not always be immediate, but it is inevitable. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the righteous. What happens to them, Do they always get the happy ending? Not necessarily. In some stories, the righteous are shown as triumphant, but in others they face persecution and suffering. Think about the story of Joseph from the Bible. He was a righteous person who was sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. He endured years of hardship and wrongful imprisonment before finally rising to power in Egypt. Or consider the story of Moses, who led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, but was not allowed to enter the Promised Land because of his own flaws. These stories teach us that the righteous are not immune to suffering and that their struggles do not always end happily. However, in many traditions, the righteous are ultimately rewarded for their faith and good deeds. They are promised an afterlife filled with peace and happiness, often depicted as a kind of paradise where they are reunited with loved ones and free from pain and suffering. So while the righteous may not always triumph in this world, they can find comfort in the promise of a better world to come. Now, here's a question for you to ponder. How do you define the righteous? Is it someone who follows a particular religion, or someone who simply tries to live a good and honest life? What about the wicked? Is it someone who commits terrible crimes, or someone who just does and seem to care about the suffering of others? Another interesting thing to consider is that cosmic justice doesn't always unfold on our tiny human timeline. It can take years, decades, or even centuries for the scales of karma to tip in favor of the righteous or the wicked. For example, in the case of the wicked, they may get away with their evil deeds for a long time, but their actions may eventually catch up with them in unexpected ways. They may lose everything they hold dear, be it their wealth, their reputation, or their loved ones. On the other hand, for the righteous, their struggles and sacrifices may not seem to make sense in the moment, but they can trust that their faith and good deeds will ultimately be rewarded. They may not see the payoff in this world, but their reward may come in the form of inner peace, wisdom, or a deep sense of purpose. Ultimately, the concept of cosmic justice reminds us that our actions have consequences. No matter how powerful or wealthy we are, we cannot escape the laws of the universe. The truth may not always be apparent, but in the end, every deed will be accounted for. Every tear will be dried, every wound will be healed, and every sacrifice will be rewarded. We may not know what happens after we die, but we can trust that the universe will restore balance and harmony. So what does this all mean for us today? How should we live our lives knowing that we will ultimately be judged for our actions? The answer, of course, is to strive to be good and do what is right, not for the sake of avoiding punishment, but because it is the right thing to do. As the great philosopher Epictetus once said, it is not things that upset us, but our judgments about those things. Instead of worrying about what may happen to us in the afterlife, we should focus on living a life that we can be proud of. A. Be kind to others, show compassion to those in need, and stand up for what you believe in. That is the best revenge. So what are your thoughts on the topic? Does the idea of cosmic justice bring you comfort, or do you think it's just a fairy tale for the masses? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching.